Hi everyone, welcome to the Inner Game of Change podcast, where we focus on exploring the multi-layers of managing organizational change effectively. Our guests cover a diverse number of critical topics to enable change adoption, including communication, leadership, training, change practice, process design, change capability, and much more. My name is Ali Juma. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Michael Canic to discuss his recently published book, Ruthless Consistency. Dr. Michael Canic is the president of Making Strategy Happen consulting firm that helps committed leaders turn ambition into strategy and strategy into reality. Michael says, when all is said and done, a lot more gets said than done. To change this requires more than just the will to win. It demands the will to do what it takes to win. It demands ruthless consistency. Well, Michael, good to meet you and thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Ali. Great to be here. Thank you.
Great. Today, Michael, I would like to talk to our audience and share with them some nuggets from your book, Ruthless Consistency. I've read the book. Actually, I started again on a couple of paragraphs because I like them. But let me start with you with the two words, ruthless and consistency. Two critical words. Can you elaborate on that and why you chose those two words?
Absolutely. And we'll start with the consistency part. And to be clear, sometimes when people hear consistency, Ali, they think of, well, are you talking about, robotic repetition, mindless activity, just do something consistent, never question it? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm really talking about is a ruthless consistency of purpose. So that for a leader, all of your decisions and all of your actions are relentlessly aligned with your intentions. Because many strategic change initiatives fail. Most do, as a matter of fact. The statistics show that 60-70% of all strategic change initiatives fail. Why? Largely because as leaders, we're not consistent. We send mixed messages. We say it's important, but we don't do something. Or we give people training, but without the resources. So every decision, every action has to be consistent. Now, ruthless simply means unwavering, unrelenting. You can't be consistent some of the time and think we're going to get results. It's every time, every day, every decision, every action. And it's not easy. And that's why 60-70% of change initiatives fail. But as leaders, if we can, hold ourselves accountable to making sure that if we're truly focused on achieving some results, some outcome, that all of our decisions, all of our actions, the processes we put in place, the practices we exhibit, all of those things need to be aligned with our goals.
Michael, from where you sit, how would you rate, based on those principles, how would you rate the current leadership capability?
More talk than action. So I think leaders in general will say, well, of course, we have to be aligned. We have to be consistent. And then it's forgotten about, not understanding what all is involved in being consistent, what has to be done consistently. So I think there's, as many things, good intentions. There's a lot of talk. But the focus and discipline to put it into practice, that's where we see the gap, and that's why most strategic change initiatives fail.
Great. Yeah, great. Look, I think certainly COVID-19 would have given us a lot of lessons over the last 12 months.
Absolutely. And if anything, it's shown that if we have this consistency of purpose, there might be a different path to achieving it. So right now, with a lot of my consulting clients, the overall goal or purpose of the organization is the same, but what we've had to change is some of the specifics. How do we go to market? How do we distribute? How do we engage our people? Those things may change, but again, they're all changing consistent with our overarching goals. If anything, what COVID has taught us is we really need what I call quick cycle strategy, where we have to be able to cycle and recalibrate strategy much more quickly, given a fast-changing environment, and ask ourselves what scenarios could play out. How do we prepare ourselves from those scenarios, and what would trigger us to take certain actions? So I find it's really accelerated the strategy cycle, dealing with all the uncertainties of the COVID environment.
COVID-19 has uncovered something for me anyway, through my experience, is that leaders got all of a sudden they actually don't have all the answers.
No, well, and of course, as we know, leaders never had all the answers.
Well, some of them think that they have all the answers.
That's
yes.
right. But now they're realizing they don't have all the answers. And the what I convey to people is it's okay not having all the answers. Sometimes leaders feel they have to have all the answers, so then they make up the answers or they go with their gut. Well, one, it's okay to know all the answers. Two, you have a team of people. And I think if there's one thing we've learned, it truly takes a team. And we have to get people's input, their ideas, their perspective on what we need to accomplish. It doesn't mean all the decisions are made democratically. I'm not talking about that. But I think leaders need to realize and are realizing that we need different inputs and different perspectives to come to better decisions. So I think, not having all the answers is okay. The other thing is, in a fast changing environment, Ali, you won't have all the answers, or the answers today won't be the answers tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you have to be comfortable with that contingency and be prepared to continually recalibrate, adjust the sails, so to speak, as you're sailing, knowing that the winds are going to change, and be okay with that. You can't just point the ship in one direction, say go, and not make any adjustments.
Perfect. I'm actually talking about sailing. I was watching the America's Cup a few weeks ago, and one of the principles that really I focused on is when New Zealanders won it again, so they retain it against the Italians. But when they asked the skipper, what did you focus on? And he mentioned a couple of things again about the ruthless consistency, is that everything is about speed and every decision we make is about making the boat go faster.
Right.
And day in, day out, in the water and off the water. And so, again, that's another validation for, for your principle around the ruthless consistency, Michael.
Yes, and we see that in any elite level, scenario, whether that's sports or business or entertainment, the people who are at the very top have an intensive focus. And focus is often defined by what you choose not to do, what you're not going to let distract you. And too often, I think leaders, we become the victims of our ambition. We see all the things that could be done or should be done that we'd like to have done, the opportunities, the possibilities, and we get diffused. Our focus gets diffused. So having that intensive focus, whether it's speed in the case of the America's Cup or whatever it is for your business, it's maintaining that intensity and then that painstaking alignment to make sure all our decisions and actions are absolutely consistent with that focus. That's when we're successful.
Does the ruthless consistency pose a problem at some stage when things do not go right or you want to pivot to climbing another mountain?
It doesn't create a problem. I mean, if you're one, it may be we're not doing the right things to achieve our focus. We thought we were, but business is not a science. There's a lot of uncertainty. So we conduct many experiments, taking some action, thinking it's going to lead to a result. If it doesn't, then we need to recalibrate and say, okay, if that didn't lead to the outcome we want, what do we need to do instead? Now, the second scenario is when you decide you need to change your purpose, your focus. We're doing something that's no longer relevant in the marketplace. We have to recalibrate the overall purpose or focus of our business. So we have to be open to that as well and be open to those external realities. But in either case, once we choose that, again, we have to painstakingly align our decisions, our processes, our structure, our systems, everything with what we intend to achieve.
Great. You have a key statement in your book. What is more important than anything you do is everything you do.
Yes. And we tend to piecemeal things. And what I mean by that is, let's say we have a big strategic change initiative. We want to implement a new ERP system for the business. So we say, well, let's get people through training, or let's buy the technology and think, well, we bought the technology, we've got people through training, we're done. Well, there's much more to it than that, because if people don't, have the training, but maybe don't have the support to apply it, maybe metrics or incentives are pointing them in a different direction. Do they have that? Do they get feedback on how well they're doing? Are they reinforced for doing the right things? Are they held constructively accountable if not? So any one thing misaligned could undermine your efforts. All the arrows, all the messages we send as leaders have to be consistent and consistently point people in the right direction. And that's why, again, if we don't do that, that's why so much failure results.
So I took the poetic license to add another statement to your statement, which is what is more important than anything you do is everything you do and everything you don't do.
Yes, exactly. Again, choosing what not to do, yes. The things that are either irrelevant or could send a mixed message and confuse people about your intention.
Yes.
Because that's what we often do. We confuse employees. We say one thing is important, but then they see us pointing towards something else. You trumpet excellence, but you tolerate poor performance. Or you give people training, but not the authority to implement the training. Or lots of authority, but no resources. So yes. Again, it's the mixed messages.
Great. Talk to me about over-communication. Which is, I think we already talked about, this is only through exaggerated effort you get a normal outcome.
That's right. Leaders by nature, in fairness, tend to under-communicate because they're familiar with the change. They've thought through the pros and cons. Yeah. They've thought through all the alternatives. They've planned it out. So they're very familiar with it. So it's natural to think, well, we can just give people a summary and they'll go along with it. In fact, when you're communicating to your people, the first thing they're thinking is why? Why is this important? Why do we have to change? Things seem to be going well. Why this? Why now? Why me? Why here? Why? So we have to over-communicate to people, not just what we're doing, not just how we intend to do it, but why. And we have to continually reinforce that because otherwise people get distracted and they forget. So as leaders, we have to remind them, and it might seem like we're doing it excessively, but if that's how it feels, then we're probably communicating the right amount.
Yeah, look, I think with the why, I always think, and I used this recently with one of the sponsors, it's going to have to be an honest why. It's not a masked why. And an honest why will actually get you a long way, and it might be painful at the beginning, but will save you a lot of time and sweat later on when you start implementing it and people realize that the first why was not really the real why.
Yes, the importance of candor.
Yeah.
And candor builds credibility. And as leaders, if we lose our credibility, Ali, then we lose our ability to effectively lead people. So to be credible, people can often tell if you're trying to mask something or you're trying to put a smile on it. You want to be real. Now, at the same time, you don't want to communicate the sky is falling and we're doomed. There has to be a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
But we need to be open to communicating. Here's what our competitors are doing. If we don't change, we could be in big trouble. Here's what our customers are telling us. If we don't change, we could be in big trouble.
Yeah.
So here's what we've decided to do. Here's the light at the end of the tunnel. Here's how we're going to roll it out. Here's how it's going to impact you. Here's how we're going to support you. So that's the kind of over-communication, candid over-communication, but making sure we give people a light at the end of the tunnel and a roadmap.
Yeah. Like I was also reading John Cotter's, he actually just released a report just a couple of days ago, and 3 takeaways from the last 12 months. And the first one is transparency and communication. So now effective communication has become an expectation from teams, about how they expect to be communicated to and with from their leaders.
And I'm happy you said with, because there's a big difference between communicating at people and communicating with people. And too often as leaders, we feel we have to just keep people informed or updated. So we push information at them. We're communicating at them. Well, far more effective is if we communicate with them, which means 2 ways, which means getting their input, getting their feedback, allowing them to process something. So a quick example, if you're, communicating to a group of, let's say, 10, 15 people, And at the end of it, you say, does anyone have any questions? What do you typically get when you ask, does anyone have any questions?
Oh, it will be probably a lot of hesitation to even raise a hand.
Exactly. You get a lot of silence, a lot of hesitation.
But
That's communicating at people.
But then they might go outside over coffee and verbalize all the things.
That's where the communications occur. They go to the break room. They go, oh, that'll never happen. Oh,
absolutely, yes, yes.
So better is to communicate with them. So here's what I suggest. You communicate to that group or 10, 15 people, but then you say, people, I'm going to give you just 1 minute. Give thought to what's your number one reaction? Or what's your number one question, given what I've just said? Or what do you like about what I've just said? Or what concerns you? Give people time to process it, then get their feedback.
Yeah.
And then you ask people randomly, say, Ali, what was your number one reaction? Or Jasmine, what was a question you came up with? So now I'm communicating with people by engaging them. It's got to be a two-way process. We can't just be communicating at people. We need to communicate with them.
Right. Do we take time to process information when somebody is actually communicating a message? Do we take time or do we need time because the first thing that comes at us is that this change is going to be a pain for me? Or I start thinking about what's my gain and what's my pain out of this change? And I think you referred in the book to it around the incentives and the disincentives.
Exactly. And this human psychology is when we hear something, the first reaction is often an ego reaction. What does this mean for me? Is this good? Is this bad? If it's uncertain, what are the possibilities? How bad could they be? So we get into this, kind of ego reaction, which is, again, natural in human psychology. So, are people preparing a response? No, they're first of all reacting. And as leaders, we need to understand that people are going to react from that egocentric viewpoint. We need to give them time to process what we've said. And then we need to enable them to verbalize, what's your number one concern with this? Or even better, I can imagine, Ali, what you're probably thinking is, this could cause some problems, or, what does this mean for my job? Well, that's a natural reaction, Ali. Let me tell you what it could mean. Let me tell you how we're going to proceed here. Yeah. So I think as leaders, we have to acknowledge that and not just assume people are going to rationally process and respond to something, a change, as soon as we talk about it.
Yeah. One of the exercises that I did recently is that I ran a workshop after, the sponsor launched the change. And then the workshop was predominantly, now you've got the message, now you understand the change. Let's sit together and then let's brainstorm how that's going to impact our processes, our roles and our responsibilities. So it's actually come from them, which is far more comprehensive list of things to think about before things actually go wrong. And another strategy that I usually follow is that what I call, and it's a principle that I coined from, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's coming in a book called When by Daniel Pink. It's called conducting a pre-mortem test, which is right at the outset, can we go through a process and really anticipate what can go wrong with this? So, and then we list all the things that potentially can go wrong, and then we understand them right at the outset and include them in our project plan, so we can ensure that they're actually not going to happen.
Yes, I think you've said a couple of key things there. One is that you're involving them. And that way, then again, the change is being done with them, not to them. So they have a role in determining, how we do this, what the pitfalls might be. Your second point, exactly. The question I often like to ask is, people, why will this fail? We know the history, we know the culture, we know how we do things here. Let's just have a very candid discussion. Why will this fail? So much like your pre-mortem. But then what's critical is after you identify those things, then what preventative measures do we need to take?
Yes.
And if things start to fail, what corrective measures do we need to take?
Yep. Great. What is more important than you do is what people feel. So that's about the people experience.
Right, what they experience. Often leaders will fool themselves into thinking, And let's say you take the example of something simple, a mission statement or vision statement. And I'll ask a leadership team, have you created a vision statement? They'll say yes. I'll say, have you communicated it to your people? Yes, we have. Have you made it accessible? Can they see it? Is it posted somewhere? Yes, we've done that. So they're thinking, well, we've created, we've communicated, we posted our mission, our vision statement. People have a sense of purpose. But then if you ask the people, do they remember it? Do they buy into it? Do they apply it in their decisions and actions? They could answer no to those three questions. So again, the point is we have to approach it from a people-centric perspective. What leaders do is not as important as what their people experience. Why? Because it's the people who are implementing the change.
Yeah.
They're building the product, they're providing the service, they're implementing the change. It has to make sense from their perspective. So, a key point for leaders is not to be so self-centered. It doesn't matter if it makes sense to you. The question is, does it make sense to them? That's what you want to monitor. That's what you want to try and influence. And if it's not happening, then you better change what you're doing so that they have a clear understanding of what needs to be done and why.
And Michael, one event is not going to cut it.
No. And, we have this check the box mentality that, okay, we did, oh yeah, click. Yeah, we did that. We had that event. We communicated to them. Yeah. We posted it.
We sent an email.
Right. We sent an email. Exactly. Again, consistency, not just once, but this has to permeate everything we say, everything we do, everything we don't say and don't do. And again, that's what creates focus. That's what creates alignment.
Talk to me about the principle of constructive accountability. Accountability sometimes got a connotation of performance management.
It does, and it has negative associations with many. And I have seen companies spend millions of dollars on large initiatives with expensive technology and training and, executives flying around the world, all of this. But then the moment they don't hold someone accountable is the moment they send the message, this is optional. Do it if you feel like it. Don't do it if you don't. So many companies stumble simply because of managers' discomfort with holding people accountable. So I think we need to reset our thinking on this. And that is, the purpose of accountability it's not to berate people, it's not to belittle people, it's not to bully people. The purpose isn't destructive. The purpose is constructive. We hold people accountable because we want them to what? Improve,
succeed,
learn, succeed, grow, right? Though it's very positive, the motives here, the intentions. So I think we need to reframe our thinking. So I have people call it constructive accountability to get us in the mindset that this is a constructive process. And a leader as a coach needs to take responsibility for that. It's not just telling people, it's working with them as colleagues. What is it the employee needs to do? But what do you need to do as a leader to support them or provide them the necessary, resources or whatever to enable them to achieve? So there's a joint involvement, a joint responsibility in this process, but we need to think of it as constructive accountability, something we should want to do to give people the opportunity to improve.
Is it a team? Is it a leader? Is the leader accountable, or is the team accountable, or is it, as you mentioned, is it a joint accountability?
Well, they're different accountabilities. So, the team is, each individual is accountable for his or her performance.
Yeah.
But there's also an accountability to the team, depending on the kind of work. Their how they go may determine how the team goes. The leader is accountable for the performance of his or her team and for his or her own actions. And I think where it starts is with the leader looking in the mirror and saying, have I done what I need to do to give each team member a fair chance to succeed? Have I done what I need to do to create an environment where each team member can thrive, can achieve? That's where accountability starts, with the leader holding him or herself accountable.
It is a very hard exercise to hold the mirror, Michael.
It is.
Because we have something called ego. and
exactly.
we overestimate our capabilities.
Yes, but leaders, there are a lot of examples of leaders who, and this has been written about a lot as well, leaders who can overcome their, egocentric nature. And, the way I summarize it is this: as a leader, it's not about you, it's through you. It's not about you, it's through you.
Yeah.
It's through your efforts your team can excel, they can achieve. You can't be successful as a leader unless they are successful. Your purpose is helping them be successful.
You're right.
And you want to do everything you need to do and question what you're doing in a constructive, positive way, not to beat yourself up. Again, this is constructive accountability, but it's asking very objectively, what do I need to do to more effectively help my team, achieve?
Great. You talked about most of the time when we roll out changes, not everybody will be on board in the first initial stages. There's always going to be what we call laggards or detractors or people that sit in there and then they don't want to be part of the change. And we've noticed that also over the last 12 months in COVID-19 is that critical mass is good enough.
Right. So I think of it as three groups of people. Those at the front end of the change who are really the active proponents. They see it, they want to be a part of it, they move forward. You have this group in the middle who are, cautious, maybe even a little bit skeptical. And then you have the group at the back end who are the cynics, the resistors or detractors, right? So often with change, we focus on the people at the back end trying to convince them of the merits of changing. Well, I find it more constructive to focus on the people at the front end, people who are the active proponents, enable them, support them, encourage them to move forward with the change, and then we trumpet their successes. That then influences the people in the middle of the curve, that maybe cautious group, to say, oh, this is okay, it can succeed, it's safe. We start to pull them along. Then the people at the back end of the curve become isolated. And then they have a choice as being isolated. Either they get with the program or they may not fit with the organization. Yeah. So typically I want to spend my time on the proponents of change. Now, having said that, if somebody's a real destructive, detractor of change, obviously you have to deal with that as a leader. Yes. But otherwise, notwithstanding that, I'd rather focus on the people at the front end of the change, create those quick wins, those early successes, trumpet them, and start to pull other people along for the change.
Dealing with the detractors is a time-consuming exercise, and the reason probably some of the leaders focus more on the detractors because they are the noisiest usually, and they can create. But I agree completely with your notion that. From my experience, I never ignore them because it's important to send that message that we're going to support you, but at the same time, when our deal is to, give you the best opportunity, create the best environment for this project to succeed, we're going to train you and develop you, and we're going to invest in your capability. Right. The last thing we want from you is to sit in there and say, I still don't like it. Or you start influencing and undermining the process at the implementation stage, because that can happen. From your experience, what are some of the strategies to deal with the detractors?
So if it's somebody who is a destructive detractor, in terms of their words or actions, leaders need to jump on that quickly and be very clear that if their behaviors aren't acceptable, that they're not acceptable, that they won't be tolerated. And if they're not on board with it, well, they're going to be left behind.
Sure.
And while you don't expect them to lead the parade, you expect them to at least not undermine the parade.
You're right. Yeah.
So I think, with the destructive distractors, we have to be able to do that. But I found what's very powerful is if you do ignore the ones who aren't destructive, but are just, more cynical, the psychology of it is they start to feel left out. Paradoxically, when we pay attention to them, try to convince them, their power lies in denying us what we want. Okay. But if you ignore them, you take away that power, and then some of them start to say, well, how come I'm not getting the opportunity to do this? Why aren't I getting the support? Then the response is, oh, well, happy you mentioned that. Let's give you the support so you can do that. Yeah. So there's a bit of psychology here, and sometimes we inadvertently play into their being detractors by reinforcing them that that's where their power lies. So that's why we have to be cautious around that.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes we breathe oxygen into it, which
Yes.
can make it even worse.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love the principle of micro training. I'm a big fan of training, and I come from a martial arts environment, and long years in training and getting all the way to the black belt, and I value the notion of it's only through a well thought through training that because that's another lever to actually enable us execute the change. And you talk about the principle of micro training.
Yes. What I've been finding in recent years is everybody's so busy. One of the things that seems to have fallen through the cracks a lot is training. And leaders find it increasingly difficult to get people, out of the field for a day or off the shop floor for a day. How do we do that? In COVID times, especially, we're separated. How do we get people through training?
Yeah.
So what we found to be very effective is this notion of micro training, which are single topic, 15-minute modules. We can generally get people away for 15 minutes. We can get them off the floor, out of the office for 15 minutes. We just can't do it for a full day. And in 15 minutes, if we can deliver one concept or one process or one model, right, then, they're much more likely to retain it and apply it than if we take them away for a day and throw 20 things at them. They're not going to remember 20 things. So we've actually found it an effective way, when done with regularity, for people to retain and apply information. So at the frontline work group, for example, every 2 weeks, we might do a micro training session. Well, that's 26 modules in a year. You can convey a lot through 26 micro training modules. With the leadership team, when we meet them with them on strategy progress tracking, every month we build in a micro training module on leadership development. So they're getting 12 micro training modules a year on leadership development. So the key to successful micro training, and this is important, first, you have to keep it to one thing. There's a temptation having a captive audience to throw more things at them. Don't. You'll dilute the focus on the one thing. So keep it to that one thing. 2, give them a chance to process it. Don't communicate at them, communicate with them. So you communicate the process or the model, but give them a time to process it, get their input, get their feedback, engage them. And then the third and final key to an effective micro-training session, leave them with a takeaway. And that might be a hard copy or electronic model or tool or visual, something that they can refer back to, that you can refer back to with them. And I'll tell you, Ali, we've found this to be very, very effective implementing micro-training. 1, we can find the time to get it done. 2, people are much more likely to retain it and apply it. And 3, they actually like it and look forward to it. It's a short, crisp session, something they can grab onto. It's proven very effective.
And Michael, what I find also, I've actually applied this principle, but I called it a bite-sized training. But what I also like about those sessions is that not only the audience will walk away with one thing and one thing only, and they're going to think about it, but it's an opportunity to reiterate the messages again about the change. And so it's the same consistent message. They hear it again and again, and it's all connected. And it creates a link to what the organization is trying to achieve. So it's not like they feel that, okay, well, Michael has come to our session and he's just for 2 hours gave us all of those things, and then that's it. There's nothing else over the next 6 months, and we forget about it. And then, as you mentioned, the message gets diluted. Small, sharp, actually in martial arts. There's a book called Toyota Kata, which is specifically about training and how the Japanese focus on training. Not only they do it in a bite size, but they focus a lot on simulation, which is let's do it. And let's do one process again and again. And you won't be able to do it on the in the factory unless I'm satisfied that you can actually do this. And that's what they call the kata training, which is from
very good.
from the karate principle. So doing rather than, as you mentioned, talking at them is going to have to be really the theory. What is it? Tell me, show me, and get me to experience it.
Right.
Only through those that I can probably walk away understanding maybe 60% of the process itself, and the 40 will be on the job learning. Choosing the right team as one of the principles that you promoted in your book.
Yes. It's fine to have the right focus, where we have that very narrow focus, and then to create the right environment so our people can perform their best. But we also have to have the right team, which calls into question, how do we recruit? How do we select people for the right team? How do we know if we have the right team? And if there's one thing I've found continually reinforced over time, that is organizations tend to select people based on skills and experience. Can they do the job? Have they done the job? Which seems to make sense. But the more important question is, will they do the job? And that is often determined not just by their skills or their experience, but by their traits. So I put a lot of emphasis, Ali, on the traits people have. Do they have the right traits? So just, some examples. Depending on the job, you may need a person who's highly curious. You may need somebody who takes initiative. You may need somebody who's very cost conscious or speed oriented or innovative or deals well with adversity. So, look at what are the traits that are needed to be successful, because often, depending on the position, we can give people the training. Often they can gain experience, but if they don't have the right traits, they're not likely to be successful. And I'm sure all of us have seen examples where somebody has looked great on their resume. Wow, great experience, great skills, but then they failed in their job. And we say, well, why? They look so good on the resume. Well, typically it's because they didn't have the right traits.
The way I look at it, Michael, is that skills and capabilities are indicators of the past, and the attitude is an indicator for the future. So that's a potential way you're going to bring to the table when you join the team.
Well put. Yes. Again, skills, experience of the past, but those traits are more enduring. So if I'm the kind of person who values excellence, and my work has to reflect that, or if I want to take ownership of things, or take personal responsibility, or I like challenges, those kinds of traits are more likely to endure. And if they serve a job well, then again, you can often provide people with skills and they can gain the experience.
You are a rock climber by the sound of it, or is it a mountain climber? One of them.
Well, mostly mountaineering, some rock climbing as well.
Yeah. I can't even. I'm a marathon runner, so I try to do desert marathons for whatever reason. So talk to me. What are some of the learnings that you've gained from your climbing experience?
Well, it's interesting you ask, because there are a lot of applicable concepts from climbing. One is preparation. You don't just go on a mountain and say, okay, I'm going to go climb this. But again, everything has to be consistent with your efforts. So that's everything from your training to the resources you have, as in your gear and your clothing, your equipment. Do you need a guide to take you up the mountain? So you might need some support as far as that. Maybe technology to help you determine weather systems that are coming in. So again, everything has to very much be aligned with what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
The second thing that very much comes through in climbing is removing what's excess. So climbers are relentless around removing weight from their packs. Anything that's not 100% essential, they don't want to carry that weight. I've heard it even as extreme as some climbers shaving bristles off of a toothbrush to reduce weight, to show how extreme they can get. Because the idea is that any ounce, any pound, that's not necessary, when you're having to climb at altitude with that, that drains your energy.
Yeah.
So the analogy is, in business, often we climb with too much excess in our packs. we take on too many things that aren't necessary, aren't needed. And what they do is they weigh us down from our goal, which is climbing the summit. Mm. So I think climbing really helps you focus on only packing what's necessary. It makes sure you're really well prepared and aligned with your, your equipment, your gear, your training, and everything else. And then the last thing I find is a great parallel is dealing with adversity. So climbing, there are setbacks, there are physical, there are psychological setbacks. I've been in a situation where we've been pinned in our tent for 3 days because of a storm. So you have to deal with the setback of, when is this going to end? Are we going to be able to climb?
Right.
Sometimes it's just fatigue. Sometimes you're tired. You see the summit up ahead finally. And then as you get there, you notice it was a false summit, that the true summit is behind it and even higher up. All right. So these psychological and physical battles you have to deal with in climbing. And the reality is we have to deal with that adversity. Well, same is true in business or in any organization. There are obstacles, there are challenges, and we need to be able to deal with those to ultimately succeed.
I subscribe to the idea of preparation. My experience, I did Marathon des Sables, which is 6 days, 6 marathons in the Moroccan desert. And you carry, this is described arguably as the hardest race on foot on earth. So you do a marathon and then you sleep, you wake up the following morning and you do another marathon in the desert. And I thought I prepared for it for a year and a half before. And Michael, the moment I got there from day one, from hour number one, before even getting to first checkpoint, I realized how underprepared I was. Talking about the weight, because we carried our own food and everything else. They just give you water. Yes. I realized that, oh my God, did I need to have this big spoon? Everybody else had a teaspoon.
Exactly.
Did I need this big knife? Because everybody took the piece from the pencil sharpener and considered that as a knife. Yes. And then they talked about, we don't want to have weight. You need to self-assess what you need and just go with the minimum. I had a full mattress. Everybody else, their mattress only covers their shoulders, and that's what they call a mattress.
Yes.
And so the desert, and I'm sure the mountains have a funny way to tell you that you so overestimated your abilities.
Exactly. That's a great example. And again, every gram, it all counts. And, we don't realize or fully understand what's needed for, elite performance until we're in a situation that really demands it, like you've been in the desert or a mountain climb. And then it really recalibrates your thinking about all the things we thought were necessary, but are excessive.
And I think you talked about the will to win and the will
to do what it takes to win.
That's it.
Right. And many have the will to win and say, yes, we want to accomplish this. We're going to accomplish this. We want to feel what it feels like to win. But do we have the will to do what it takes? Which is often uncomfortable, which is often maybe what we don't like to do or aren't good at doing, but we have to do if we're going to give ourselves the opportunity to succeed. That's the will to do what it takes to win.
Right. Michael, if you were to coach your next client, how would you start and what prep work would you expect them to do?
I would have them look in the mirror to start. And have a very honest conversation. Have I done what I've needed to do? And I would prepare them with talking about, what the right focus, creating the right focus looks like, creating the right environment, building the right team. I would give examples of the teams, the organizations, the athletes that have done that, what it looks like, and say, this is what true commitment looks like. And in the book, I give the example of the skier Lindsey Vonn, who had what was described as a maniacal training regimen to prepare herself to be the outstanding skier she was. So if this is the marker for excellence, for commitment, how have you been? So I want leaders to really take a look in the mirror, and the third key principle I outline in the book is you're not as committed as you need to be yet. So I think we need that realization that I haven't done what I need to do, and that's okay as long as I'm willing to commit to do what I need to do. So I think we have to have that honest self-assessment calibrated against what true commitment looks like. Have we really been as committed as we need to be?
Fantastic. We are coming to the close of our great conversation. I'm really enjoying it, and I started thinking about quite a few things myself, which is quite uplifting and inspiring for me. Michael, how would people reach you, and how can we get hold of a copy of your book? Well, I've got my copy.
That's right. Well, my company's called makingstrategyhappen.com. Makingstrategyhappen.com. The book is available through our website or through your favorite online retailer. So they can get the book there. They can reach me at makingstrategyhappen.com or on LinkedIn as well. And happy to connect with people. And what I might leave you with is, and for every leader, it's not easy, so I don't want to make this sound easy because it's not. That's why most change initiatives fail. But at the end of the day, despite the challenges and obstacles and everything else, it's ultimately not you against those challenges, not you against those obstacles. It's you versus you. And if we take that kind of responsibility, that we have ultimately control over the decisions we make, the actions we take, then we can choose to be successful.
Fantastic. You versus you. I'd like to have a T-shirt with that saying on it. I love this, Michael. I'm really grateful for your time. At some stage in the future, I would love to have you back in here again, and then perhaps 12 months down the track and see how things are going with you. And hopefully by then you would have started your second book. It's been a pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you, Ali.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode with Dr. Michael Canic. To know more about this podcast, check the innergameofchange.com.au website. To receive more podcasts, simply subscribe. In our next podcast, we will meet with an innovation guru and a business improvement specialist to explore the impact of process design on change adoption. Until then, stay well and stay safe.